Everyone wants more manufacturing, more science and engineering jobs, and the better pay and sales that come with them. But what will it take to get there? Are we close? My guest today knows firsthand the challenges of doing that kind of business here, and he has strong ideas about what local and Florida leaders can do to improve. Dr. Bob Scaringe is president of Mainstream Engineering, a Rockledge company he founded 27 years ago. To say Mainstream Engineering produces products used in heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration doesn't do it justice. Scaringe and his staff of more than 100 are deeply involved in research and development and have invented technologies that could transform cars, fuel production, and small factories. And in case you're wondering, yes, he's hiring. Bob, you've been involved in manufacturing and engineering and education and all kinds of things here in Brevard County for about, what, 27 years?
Yeah.
And so you've got a pretty good sense of the climate here. How do you size things up in terms of our economy and our potential for manufacturing here in Brevard County?
Well, the governor's doing a great job in that he's trying to make this a work-friendly state, and I just love that. But in terms of manufacturing, we're the third largest state in the union. We have to have manufacturing to support the population. And what bothers me is, you have the governor going down to a Bass Pro Shop doing a ribbon cutting because they created a Bass Pro Shop down there. Well, that's great, and it's great. It created some jobs, but they're not high-paying, high-tech jobs. So I think what we need to be doing is focusing on manufacturing, and what do we need to do to really promote manufacturing in the state. And when you look at that, all the indices are the wrong way. We have one engineering school in the top 50. California, the largest state in the union, has 9. Texas has something like 3. We have 1. California has 95 vocational colleges in the state. 95. Texas has 45 or 46. We have 15. So the problem is, we can be doing these great things about trying to get people to move into the area. We got Embraer coming in down in Melbourne and stuff like that. But unless we have people who can work in these factories that are trained, that have a certain skill level, then we can't sustain the manufacturing. And that's the problem that I see. We're not doing anything to build a workforce, both a professional workforce and a talented trade workforce. They're just not there. I was at the Brevard delegation meeting not too long ago this week, and when I came back, we had a meeting of a Refrigeration Association meeting here in Mainstream, and lo and behold, the air conditioning apprentice program that they had at Eastern State College is gone. They canceled it this year. And it's like, where are we going? We're going in the wrong direction.
So, if there was anything that needed repair, fixing, creation in Florida, it would be air conditioning, right?
Right, exactly. And then if you look, and you say, okay, where are we going? We used to have community colleges that at least had some vocational programs. I would have liked to have seen those vocational programs get better, but at least we had them. We had welding and we had machinists and stuff like that. What do? We said all those community colleges are now state colleges. They're just feeders for the 4-year schools. They're just trying to push everyone through with a degree. And that's just wrong. I think, first of all, if I'm going to pay for the state university system to subsidize people to go to college, which I think I should, I'm all for that. I'm all for the state having lower tuitions for degrees at the universities. But if they're going to do that, they should be degrees that have value when you come out. I don't want to subsidize a kid to go to get a degree in art history. If you want to get a degree in art history, go to a private school and get that, because you're not going to get a job when you come out. There's 1 job out of 100 for that. I want to look at the programs they're offering there and saying, okay, do they have value? If a kid borrows all this money for 4 years and goes to school, and when he gets out, is he going to be able to get a job? Or is he going to be flipping hamburgers just like he would have done if he hadn't gone to school? Or if you think about the guy from Southwest that just made that announcement, he said, I have kids going to these 4-year colleges applying to come here, and I have them filling boxes. If I had a kid that went to school as a jet mechanic, I'd be paying him $120,000 a year. That was a quote he had a few years ago. I think it was a year ago. So that's the point. Everybody doesn't have to go to college, and if we're going to send them to college, let's make sure it's a college program that is a profession that they can make a good living on, not flip hamburgers. And if they're not going to go to college, they're going to go to vocational school, let's make sure we have a good vocational school. So we give a lot of lip service to bringing manufacturing in, but when a manufacturer comes into the state, what do? The first question is, where are my kids going to go to school? Because that's what they care about. And we have pretty good K through 12. It's 6th in the nation. I think we're going to mess it up with this Common Core, and I'm very upset with the Common Core. But right now we're 6th in the nation, so that's good. But then where am I going to get my workforce? And they look there and they say, well, you don't have any training programs. We do have some very good training programs in high school, training, vocation. But you've got to go beyond that. We have to go more than that. That's a good start for kids.
What do you make of some of the wins that we've had, though? I mean, we've had some announcements of like Embraer opening a second, going to open a second assembly line plant there. I think there's a Northrop Grumman Engineering Center coming in. Now, granted, in a county of 500,000 people, 1,000 jobs isn't going to change the entire economy, but is that kind of what we're talking about
yeah,
in terms of
I think that's great. I mean, I think Linda Weatherman and Space Coast EDC, they don't get enough credit. I mean, they are really paddling upstream. That is a tough thing to do, and they've gotten some great companies in here. But it's not sustainable unless they have a workforce that's talented. If they have to take high school kids with minimal training and start training them, then they're going to look at the cost of that. We need to be supplying a workforce to them. They need to be able to get engineers, they need to be able to get technicians, machinists, welders right here in the community, and we have no infrastructure to do that. And that's the problem. I mean, I have 27 openings for engineers right now, and I can't fill them. I have to go all over the country trying to find these people, and they're hard to find. And I'm not finding them in Florida. And the problem is they come to work for us for a few years, they get married, they have kids, then they want to move back home so their parents can watch their kids while they go to work. So we have this drain. If I could find local talent, it would be great. That's one of the real strong points that you have in like Wisconsin and Michigan and things like that. They have very good training vocational programs and very good universities.
Okay, but what about the big space workforce? We had all these people laid off from the space shuttle program. Every time I mention in the news somehow that that engineering companies can't find enough engineers, somebody says, well, why don't they hire locally? Why aren't they helping us take care of all those space workers? I mean, with all these people laid off, you can't find enough engineers for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, I'm going to go even further because I'm going to say I've heard the metric where people say, oh, Brevard County has more engineers per capita than any other place in the United States and blah, 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 blah. The truth is we have more engineers than any other place in the United States, but they're much older engineers, and they haven't been doing engineering for a long time. In other words, the general progression at a lot of companies is you come in, you're an engineer for 3, 4, 5 years, and you go into engineering management, and then you go to management of the engineering managers. So once you've been working for 15 or 20 years in many cases, you haven't been doing any engineering for a long, long time. You know, you went to engineering school for 4 years, and you did it for 4 years, and that was 15 years ago, so you've forgotten it all. So the problem is we don't have a lot of young engineers. We don't have a source of engineers coming out of the schools. One of the things that you always hear me pushing about is let's get a top 10 school. And the reason I say that is if you had a top 10 school, let's say you had an MIT right here. They graduate 1,000 students every year. 10% of those guys go and start their own businesses. So you'd have 10 startup high-tech businesses every year. I did that wrong. I'm saying 1,000 students come out, 10% of them would be 100. So you'd have 100 high-tech startups every year coming out of the area. That's what really gets things going. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley because of Stanford, right? Everything that's going on in Boston is going on in Boston because of MIT. When you look at all the nanotechnology stuff that's going on in Albany, New York, that's from Cornell and RPI. It's the school that creates the infrastructure and turns out the smart kids that, and not just smart, too, innovation. Teaches them about innovation and gets them to start businesses.
Okay, so we have FIT here, right?
Yeah.
Florida Institute of Technology. It's right about the same size as
Yeah.
MIT and some of the other smaller schools. They've grown a lot in the last couple of years with new buildings, a football team. They've more dormitories, non-campus living. What's the next step? How does a school like that become a top 10 engineering school, producing the kinds of people that you think that it could?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I think they have a great opportunity to do this if they jump at it. I mean, if you look, as I said, MIT has, I think, 4,500 students. RPI is just about the same. Caltech is only 977. So it's much easier for a small school to become in the top 20 or the top 10. So they have the opportunity to do this. The question
hire
is,
some stars?
You got to hire some stars, and the question is, do they have the will to do that? Do they want to do that? You know, you know, I was a professor at FIT. I'm still on the research faculty there. I think it's a great school. I think it has the potential to be there. The real question is, do they want it? And I would argue that I don't know if they want it right now because they've diverged off and done a football team. And you know, I'm one of these very simple guys: stay on target, stay on target. If you want to be the best school in the country in engineering, then you don't get sidetracked with sports and this and that. You just do the best school possible. I had high hopes for Florida Polytechnic. I thought that was going to be
the one over in Lakeland that the legislature
Lakeland.
Just approved.
And I guess there was so much politics in that and everything else, but I thought that would be our opportunity. I wish the legislature had said, let's limit the size of that school to 5,000 students. Let's say no varsity sports, and just focus on education. I think they could have done it because, you know, as a parent, when my kid gets out of school, I want to know he has a high-paying job. I don't care how good the football team was where the school he went, because my kid's not playing football. All right, I just want to know he got the best education he could. And I think we lose that when we get into these giant schools. And when you look at what they did at Florida Polytechnic, it's really sad. They spent $13 million on the blueprint for their first building. It's 160,000 square foot. $13 million just for the plans. They had some fancy architect from South America. And then they're going to pay $137 million to buy the building, to build the building. So that means over $900 per square foot, $900 per square foot to build a building. Engineers like real simple block buildings, that's all we need. The value for engineering schools is what you put in the building. It's the faculty that are there and the lab equipment that the faculty has. And here they had this huge pot of money and they wasted it. So
you have mentioned in the past to me that the way that you attract the top talent, professor, researcher who brings in grant research and that kind of thing is through like a startup package in some fashion. Explain that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but faculty members, engineers in general, the money isn't that important, the money that goes to their salary. You get a faculty member, maybe you pay them $120,000, $150,000. But what they also get is a startup package, and it's typically at a good school, $750,000 to $1 million, sometimes more than $1 million. So it's $1 million to set up their lab, to get their graduate students and pay them for their first PhD, pay them for a couple of years, buy all the equipment they need, and get the program going. So that's where you should spend the money. So if you go back to the Florida Polytechnic example, they could have built the whole building for $13 million. Then they had $137 million left, right? A faculty MIT size or RPI size for just the mechanical engineering department is about 25 students. So if they had said, let's have just mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, computer science, they'd have a faculty of about 50 people. They could give them each a $2 million startup. That would have been better than anything else in the country. They could have gotten the best people in the whole country to come down. Those people could have developed the curriculum, started the school, had only graduate students and done graduate students and research, and really developed a great program. But instead, they dumped all the money into the buildings. And that's what we do in Florida. If you look at our economic development centers and everything else, all we do is build buildings. You know, an entrepreneur doesn't need a building. I love it when they say, oh, we're building another entrepreneurial center. I started Mainstream in 167 square feet of space. And it was a couple of $100 a month. And I was in there for 2 months, and then I went to about 400 square feet. And then 3 or 4 years later, we went to 3 acres and 5,000 square foot. So we don't need the bricks and mortar, but in Florida mentality, we just kind of, we build these centers, these bricks and mortar, which suck up all the money, and then there's no money left for the really important stuff.
Politicians like to build buildings because that's their legacy. Right. They want to be able to point to, see that, I built that, and my name might even be on that.
Yeah, I know. And that,
but what you're saying
that
is,
doesn't create any jobs,
so maybe the
except for the guys that work in the building.
Down the road, what would be best both for Brevard County's economy and for a place like Florida Institute of Technology would be, say that the next step is, okay, we've got buildings, let's put some great stuff in it. Say they got that building down in Palm Bay that I think Intersil left behind.
They've got this great, you're right, they got this great building down there. UCF, they gave it to UCF, UCF didn't want it, don't understand that, so now FIT has it. I mean, I would say something, the legislature spends something like $10 billion a year on education, right? And they spent, over $150 million at Florida Polytechnic, all right? Give 10% of that. Let's give $10 million to FIT, tell them they have to take one program and get it in the top 20 in 3 years. And we'll give you $10 million a year for 3 years, and if you're not there, we're done. Set some metrics, and let's get moving. That's the kinds of things we need to do. Instead, we're going to create a bunch of studies, we'll put a bunch of buildings up, we'll put a couple of entrepreneurial centers up. The problem with these entrepreneurial centers is it's not a problem. We don't have a lack of buildings, we have a lack of entrepreneurs. And the reason we have a lack of entrepreneurs is we have a lack of top schools. To give you a great example, Frank DeBello gave away a $100,000 prize to the best business startup concept. He did it last year. I think he's done it this year as well as part of Space Florida. He had like 75 applicants. If you go to Palo Alto or you go to Boston or you go to Albany, they have these startup nights just at a bar, and they'll get 300 people pitching to investors, okay? And now they'll say, well, you don't have a lot of investors down here to pitch to. That's because we don't have a lot of entrepreneurs. The investors will come if we have the ideas. So the key is good engineering schools, good vocational schools. They'll let the industry to move in, and the good engineering schools will spin off entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs will draw the investors in. So to me, it seems simple, doesn't it?
Very simple.
Stop building buildings.
No problem.
Invest in people, not bricks and mortar.
Well, let's talk about investing in people. You are also on a recently appointed advisory board for the school superintendent here in Brevard County. What do you make of that experience so far?
It's been great. The superintendent put together a small group of business people, and he wants us to kind of look at their whole system and everything and say, okay, where do you think we could improve? And he's, don't hold back any punches, just look at the whole system and where do you think you can improve. And so it's been great. We're not done. Our report will probably issue around February or March. We'll be done looking, but we're looking at everything from vehicle transportation to what's going on in the classroom to how they budget and everything else. And we're going to have some suggestions, but by and large, the superintendent is a real numbers guy, so he has lots of metrics. So, and what I mean by that is, I hate people that say, give me a bunch of money and I'll try to do something. I like people who say, give me a bunch of money and I'll do this. And then if you don't do that, you don't give him any money anymore. So that's the way he is. He measures stuff. And so I like that, and I think he's doing a good job. I think there's some things maybe we can talk about that make it even more streamlined. But the most amazing part is how much control comes from Tallahassee. I mean, we've got Tallahassee telling the schools how to do everything. We've got a local school board. They're elected. They don't have a whole lot of freedom. I think part of the problem is the legislature up there wants to have control. And, as I was telling you earlier, a good manager knows to delegate. You find good people and you delegate and you let them make decisions. They can't make every decision, but lots of decisions they can make. So instead of having a lot of things we can do at the local level, the Department of Education in Tallahassee is demanding a lot of things and creating a lot of paperwork, and a lot of work is spent, for instance, on full-time equivalent students. And you have to calculate these full-time equivalent students 4 times a year. And so there's a lot of overhead associated with answering all the questions and responding to everything that Tallahassee is asking you to do. And of course, I don't like this Common Core. I don't like the structure. I don't think it focuses on innovation. But it's even worse because now you have this other organization above the state setting what they call as standards, but they're really curricula. And the curricula then feeds down through Tallahassee to the schools and then gets all the way into a 3rd grade classroom. And you're telling the teacher, this is how you're going to teach math and this is how you're going to teach English. I think it's the wrong thing. We need to be letting it stay closer to the people. Let it happen at the school board area, because if you don't like what's going on in your school, you can either A, move or vote out the school board members. But if it's happening somewhere outside of Florida, what are you going to do? It's been a great experience working there, and I'm learning a lot about all the hoops they have to run through. But just so you understand, I'm a guy who believes in competition. So I'd like to see private schools, I'd like to see charter schools, and I'd like to see public schools. And I'd like to see them all compete so we have the best education. So as a parent, and I'd like to see vouchers. So as a parent, I can say, I'm going to take my money and I'm going to spend it where I think is the best. And I think the public schools can compete just as well as everybody else on that if you take the gloves off and let them fight. If Tallahassee tells them what to do, it's kind of hard for them to do that. But so I would love to see vouchers. Every kid could get a voucher. What amazes me is it would be so good for the poor, because poor people can't afford to go to that private school that they want to go to. I can afford it. I'll spend the money. They can't. So why should they be at a disadvantage because of that? And I'm not happy with with our educational system. I've told you a million times that I run into these kids that are really hands-on, really good with their hands, and they'll say, oh, well, teachers told me I'm not smart enough in math and science to go to engineering school. And it's like, what? Math and science is a tool. It's just like a wrench. I can teach anyone the necessary math and science. It may take some kids a little longer than other kids, but you can teach those tools. What I can't teach is the innovation. A guy that can see how an engine works in his head and visualize all those parts is much better to me than a guy who can multiply 7 times 7 faster than another guy. They all go get the right answer. So, we have to change some of our education. And part of that, I think, is paying teachers more and requiring teachers to have much more education. I would like to see that if you're teaching math, certainly in high school level, that you have a degree in mathematics, not a degree in education, because to me, it's the mathematics and you don't know. I mean, a lot of these teachers don't have a lot of advanced education in things like calculus. You know, I didn't understand calculus until I took advanced calculus. So if the only course I ever took in college was calculus, it would be hard for me to teach calculus. And that's what I think part of the problem is in our schools. And the other thing that I see in our schools that bothers me is we're so much into a single test. You know, I don't think there's a single test that can tell you which kids are going to do well. I'd much rather see a much more Renaissance education in high school and let kids learn a little bit about everything so they can figure out what they want to do when they go out to college and they have a little bit of a background. I just figured out something in a last week we were coming up with a problem on something, and I figured out something in ceramics because I had taken a ceramics course way back in high school. I said, can't we do this in ceramics? Can't we put this in a kiln? And we got the material scientists in, and he said, yeah, we could do that. And that was high school. You know,
wow.
You know.
Well, your company, you've been involved with somehow, some kind of new breakthrough fabrication it's beyond 3D printers or something that comes out of the Department of Defense. It's very mysterious. I've heard talk about this. What is going on? What is it?
Well, I'm hoping we can put this together, and we're pretty close, but we'll see. You know, if you think about materials, when you put materials in an oven, you heat treat them and you can change their properties. When you do that, you change the total material properties because the whole thing is in the oven. And that's like 40s, 50s technology. And then after that, they come up with this idea of taking material and hitting it with a laser. And you hit it with a laser and you can change the properties at the surface. Okay. And you can heat it so fast to the surface that the heat doesn't get down and you can change the properties at the surface only. Now we can use essentially radiation, electron beams, and we can send beams into the material and change its properties at any depth we want and make all kinds of unique things. So we can dramatically improve the performance of solar collectors, or we can make heat spreaders that normally cost thousands of dollars for pennies. And what's cool about it is the only E-beam fabrication facility right now that exists anywhere is behind a security fence in a government laboratory. And so what we're trying to bring to Brevard will be the very first E-beam manufacturing facility, commercial, that people can come. And we're going to open it up to all the universities. We've got a great consortium together right now. We've got, and I apologize if I leave anybody off, but we got Department of Energy, NASA, Office of Naval Research, Space Florida, Enterprise Florida, Brevard Workforce Development, and FIT, all coming together to put this facility together in Rockledge. And it'll be wild, and it'll be open to anybody in the state, so any researcher can come and use it, any other company that wants to come and use it. But it'll be the first in the world commercial E-beam facility, so it's really exciting.
So who would own it?
Well, Mainstream's going to own it,
okay.
And we're going to let out people to have it. And
all these other partners are hoping that, you know, people might be able to produce products,
right.
or technologies.
It's not going to be very expensive to use.
The Navy could use, or NASA could
right,
use.
But it'll be the kind of things you can use. It's very inexpensive to use. In other words, to treat this material takes seconds, actually fractions of a second, and it doesn't use much power. So it'll be a very inexpensive tool that people can use. So if someone wants to try some new material processing, they can buy an hour of time for $100 or something like that, get in there and test it, instead of either not having the facility or trying to get it to a secret clearance facility. So it'll really open up manufacturing. And what we're hoping is it's actually the pilot plant. If things go well, we're going to put a much bigger facility with a continuous manufacturing line in Rockledge, which will create a lot of jobs too. But so this is just a pilot, and this one will stay as a research tool and as a production tool. We're going to do both. So it's really exciting. I mean,
you've described another thing that I always get a kick out of hearing a little bit about this, but you call it the GOAT?
Yeah, we call it the GOAT.
What is that? And it's something that you're trying to market. Tell me about this.
Yeah, it's a great idea. You know, people have been trying to take organic material waste and make fuel, or even worse, grow corn to make fuel, which I think is just terrible. But our idea is to take organic material, anything that was once alive, so it could be a plastic bottle, because that's organic material, or it could be lawn clippings, or it could be old food, it could be anything that was...
Anything that's coming out of a truck at the dump from Monday yard waste.
And you don't have to separate it, or you could separate it, but let's say you don't separate it. And what you do is you feed 10 tons of this stuff in there. So it could be yard clippings, it could be tree branches, just anything like plastic bottles, all mixed together. You feed 10 tons a day into this thing, and it will produce 1,300 gallons of fuel, of number 2 fuel oil. And that's the fuel oil that's used like in shipping terminals for ships, and it's used in power plants. It sells right now for about $2.65 a gallon. We could make it for 90 cents a gallon, but it has half the energy content, so our real cost would be $1.80 a gallon. So $1.80 a gallon is what it would cost you to make it, and that's even paying for the raw material. That's paying for the garbage, $50 an acre from a farmer. But the neat thing about it is it's portable. It doesn't plug in. It doesn't require any external things. You drive up to a farm or you park it at a landfill. We're working with Brevard County Landfill. You park it at their transfer station. They take all the yard clippings, and instead of bringing them over to the dump and filling up the landfill, you put it in the front end. Out comes fuel, goes right into a tanker, and you drive that tanker either to a power plant or over to the port and sell it, and you make a profit. Now, what we want to do is not be the guy running the trucks. We want entrepreneurs to do that. You know, just like in the Midwest, you have combines. The farmer doesn't own it, the association owns it. So what we want to do is we want to be the company building these trucks. So we want to build these vehicles and put them out on the road. They're going to sell for about $960,000 a piece, just under $1 million a piece, put them out there. So we want Brevard to be making them, again, heavy manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing, generates good jobs, and then shipping them all over the world. And it's a really exciting program. It's called flash pyrolysis, and we've developed a new reactor that allows it to go much faster.
So instead of fermenting or distilling stuff, there's a
flash, right? And that's
an explosion of some kind.
Yeah, that's exactly the key, because the key on all of this is economics. And so when you look at making fuel the way a lot of people do it, they either use bugs or they use yeast. It's a biological process, and you have to hold a large mass of this stuff and essentially make booze. And then once you make the alcohol, you distill it off and you have a fuel alcohol. That takes 28 days or something like that. So you have to have a facility capable of holding 28 days of fuel. The nice thing about our reactor, it happens in seconds. So it's much smaller. And if it's smaller, you can put it on a truck. If it's smaller, it tends to be cheaper. The nice thing also is it's not biologically dependent. So you don't have to worry about having everything just right so the bugs don't die, you know, sort of like your lawn. You don't have to worry about everything right so it grows. This is just using temperature. So it's a flash pyrolysis process. It's really exciting. We have a pilot plant now that processes 1 ton a day into fuel. So we want to just take that, make it 10 times bigger, put it on a tractor trailer, and drive it around. And we've already talked to a whole bunch of landfills. They're excited about trying it. We're trying to get together a lease program where we'll actually give it to the county, let them use it, and then see how they like it. And then, you know, like I said, try it before you buy it. And then if you like it, you can buy one, you know. And that's the whole idea.
And maybe get a letter of recommendation from them to the next
But at
one.
the end of the day, we don't want to be the salesman, because that's not our business. We want to be the manufacturer.
All right. So if there's any entrepreneurs out there, get
yeah,
in touch
this is a
with,
good opportunity
Mainstream
for
Engineering.
Yeah.
Bob, thank you so much for coming.
Sure thing. Sure thing.
Explaining things to us today. Yeah. Well, that's it for today's program. I'm Matt Reed, and I welcome your feedback on today's interview with Bob Scaringe. Shoot me an email at letters@floridatoday.com. We'll see you right here next Wednesday on WEFS and FloridaToday.com.